Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be joining us from. Welcome to the Advanced Features in ActiLife webinar. We appreciate you joining this webinar and look forward to going through this with you. We're going to go ahead and get started, and we got a lot we want to cover today. And so let's go ahead and move into the presentation. There's a control panel. You should see it. Most of you are interacting with that already. If you have a question for us, feel free to type it in the box there. We'll do our best to answer them via the chat method, and we'll also pause in the middle to answer a couple of questions as well. My name is Jeremy Wyatt. I am the Vice President of Software Engineering at ActiGraph, and I'm joined today by my colleague, Brian Bell, one of my software engineering managers here at ActiGraph, and he's the project lead for ActiLife and for our study administration tool. And he'll be moderating the questions today, and I'll be doing the presenting. Here's a quick overview of what we'd like to cover today. We want to talk specifically about targeted analysis in ActiLife. And so what do I mean by that? I'm talking about looking at some specific time periods for my data, looking at daytime physical activity only, or sleep only, or examining my weekends. And then I want to also talk about how to create custom cut points in that data, discuss the new MVPA option a little bit, talk about how to collect and use a log diary against your data, and then we'll cover a couple of other advanced topics, obtaining R-to-R measurements from heart rate data, raw data processing, so looking at the high resolution raw data from our device, how do we extract that from a large file, and how do we run the new feature extraction tool. We'll talk about how to reset a device for long-term storage, and then lastly we'll cover the Data Vault and its usefulness and how to use it. For this demo today, we'll be using ActiLife 6.8, and it's the latest version of ActiLife. If you are not running that version, you can find out about our maintenance program at this website. And so I'd like to try to do a quick poll here for our users. There's going to be a poll that just popped up. If you could answer that question that's on there real quick, we'll be able to kind of gauge who's watching and what people are what you're doing with ActiLife. So we're interested in what do you use ActiLife for? Do you just use it in the middle of your processes as your only source of processing your data, or is it one of several tools, or do you just not use it at all, use some other tool? All right, so we got about 66%, 70%. We'll keep it open for about 10 more seconds. Okay, so let's close the poll and take a look at the results. Let's see, here's the results. Not sure if you can see those. So as you can see, about half split down the middle of ActiLife only versus ActiLife as one of several tools. So that's good information to know. That kind of helps us guide what we talk about today. So thank you for taking a minute to answer that. So let's get into our examples in ActiLife today. I want to first talk about our case study 1, how to analyze daytime physical activities. And so in this example, I'm going to take a file that was mailed to a patient. The patient wore the device for a specific time, and then the patient mailed the device back to the clinical team. The patient in this example did wear the device to bed to collect sleep data, and so we're going to talk a little bit about how to look at that, maybe how to exclude that from our daytime physical activity analysis. So I've got 3 goals with this file. I'd like to exclude non-wear times and sleep times from my calculated results, and that'll be a good example to show how to walk through that process. I'd like to compare weekends to weekdays, and then I'd like to perform an analysis on the sleep periods only, and I'll talk more about that as we get there. So I'm going to go ahead and bring ActiLife over, and today I'll be working in the first 4 tabs of ActiLife. And so we're not going to talk much about the Devices tab right now. We do want to mention a couple of things when we talk about initialization for our heart rate, but we have some webinars on devices. The Wear Time Validation tab, if you've never seen this tab, it's used to remove non-wear data. We're going to spend some time in here talking specifically about these optional screening parameters. The Data Scoring tab, this is the main tab where most of the processing happens in ActiLife. We're able to apply some algorithms to our data and filter out non-wear data. And then the Sleep Analysis tab, we'll talk a little bit about how to do a sleep analysis and how to flag your sleep times. But let's go ahead and start looking at some data here. I've got a data file that I'm using as an example today. And so just to open up and look at this file, I've got an AGD. You can simply double click on that file, and that's going to go ahead and load our AGD viewer and allow you to see what's in that file. And so I've done that. You'll see in the top left we've got some basic information about the device that was collected on, when the data was collected, what firmware was running on the device at the time. Then below that we've got some biometric information that was collected at the time of initialization or download. In the bottom left we've got a graph of the data, and so this is interesting. For this file we've got a lot of looks like non-wear data up top, and that would be the mailing time. Then in the middle we've got our wear data, and then towards the bottom again some more non-wear time. And so we're going to talk about how to get rid of that and the effect that it has on your data when you don't get rid of that in this demo. On the right we've got a calendar. It gives you a quick overview of when the data was collected. So this was October 8th through the 31st, and I can look at any specific minute of any day by just clicking on that hour. So I'm going to close the AGD viewer, and I'm going to go ahead and start my analysis. One little quick tip, if you didn't know you can do this, you can actually just drag files over from Windows Explorer directly into ActiLife. We do that quite a bit here when we're doing testing. It just kind of helps make things quick. So I've got the demo file in the action area of this data scoring tab. So let me talk about these different areas just briefly. On the left-hand side I've got a list of algorithms. These are literally algorithms that have been designed or developed by different entities, different groups, different organizations that we have simply incorporated into ActiLife for your convenience. You can go and download the paper that this algorithm was derived from. In fact, if you click the question mark, it'll load a website with that information directly in there. It tells you where these cut points, for instance, came from, which paper we referenced, and what they're, how we put them in there. That's true for all of these algorithms, and in fact, we don't claim to be smart enough to create the algorithms. We just try to make the software so that it makes it easy for you to apply to your data. So filters, down here at the bottom, this bottom section is a filtering section. This allows me to filter out time periods from my data as I do my analysis. So I can exclude non-wear times. I can use subject log diaries to exclude different times, and we'll talk about those later. Then I can apply some global date and time filters, and we'll be doing that also in this example. In the center here, you've got, in this case, my demo file. You'll notice that I've got several columns across the top. You'll notice if I turn off or on an algorithm, it removes some columns. And so basically the idea is I don't want to see time and lifestyle or moderate vigorous activity levels if I'm not doing a cut point analysis. And so ActiLife just turns those columns off. You also have the ability to add your own custom columns. And if you click the Edit Columns button, you'll get a list of those columns that are available. And for this example, I've turned on a couple of time, calendar days, and vector magnitude columns. Excuse me. If I scroll to the right in this grid, I'll see those new fields that I've added. And you'll notice that for time and calendar days and for vector magnitude, I've got this unfiltered option. If you see unfiltered, what we're talking about there is wear time validation. That is unfiltered. I haven't done any filtering. If I don't apply any filters, what values do I get? And so that's we can expect that to stay the same regardless of what we do over here on the left. Okay, so let's just go ahead and do a quick calculation of energy expenditure and cut points. I'm going to use Fritzen algorithm for both just to get an idea here of what kind of data we have. So a couple of columns I want to bring your attention to. Activity kcals, this is total kilocalories for this particular file for all days. Average kcals per day, this is the kcals divided by the number of valid days, and average kcals per hour. This is the total kcals divided by the total number of valid hours. You'll notice this high sedentary time. That doesn't really look correct to me because I know that this was an active person, so 80% sedentary seems off. On the far right, you'll notice I've got 32,490 minutes total time in this file, and time unfiltered are the same because I have not applied any wear time filters. Same for calendar days. I have 24 valid calendar days right now as it stands. Also, my MVPA is about 5%, which seems pretty low for this file. Just a quick tip, if you click Edit, Select All, followed by Edit Copy, you can then paste the values directly into Excel. And we've had a lot of questions about how to do that. You can stick it in Excel and you can do your own processing and work on it there. That's just sort of a quick tip that I wanted to point out during this demo. So I'm going to jump to the Wear Time Validation tab just briefly to show you an interesting area. One goal that I have for my processing today is that I want to get rid of the sleep times in my file because I don't want those to count towards my sedentary time. I want those to just be excluded and not counted. So over in the Wear Time Validation tab, you'll notice this option at the bottom that says sleep periods. I can ignore them, just treat them as normal time periods. I can mark those sleep periods as wear time. I can also mark them as non-wear time. And so let's take a quick look at how to do that with this demo file. Jump into the Sleep Analysis tab. I'm able to select the data set, open it up, and you'll notice I get a quick graph with all my data in it. I've got some sleep periods marked from an earlier example. But a quick tip here, if you want to delete marked sleep periods in your file, these are time in bed and time out of bed times as recorded in the file. You can right-click anywhere on any graph and choose Delete All Sleep Periods for the data set. Confirm that, and it's going to go ahead and delete those sleep periods that I've marked earlier. Now, one nice tool that we have in ActiLife is this auto score feature. This is our own algorithm that we designed to quickly detect bedtime. So basically, I'm looking to mark my time in bed and time out of bed for my file. And this tool does a good job of giving a first pass estimate of when those times were. So I'm looking at a 48-hour plot. The center is midnight. And so you can see it does a pretty good job at guessing, but it's not perfect. For instance, up here in my non-wear area, it says that this is a sleep time. Let's go ahead and delete that. If I right-click on it, I can just delete current sleep period. Here's another one I need to get rid of. If I click on it, I can click Remove Period over on the right to get rid of that one. Then as I scroll down, some of these aren't perfect. You know, if, for instance, this particular sleep period, if I click on it, it's highlighted. It says the gentleman went to bed at 9:15 and then got up at 2:40. Maybe I know that's not true. Let's say it was really 5:40. I can click Edit on the right in the score information, change that to 5:40, click Save, and that period gets updated. And so that's just a quick way to enter your sleep times. Of course, you can do them manually. I'm not going to go through that right now, but if you have questions about that, we can address it. Now that those sleep times have been entered and selected, they have been automatically saved back to my dataset file. I don't have to click Save anywhere. I don't have to do anything to make sure those sleep periods are recorded in the file. They are called out as sleep times in the file, just as you see over here on the right. So for instance, on 10/13, I've got a sleep period that started at 9:37 and went to 4:51, and that is in the file and recorded. Now let's jump back to the Wear Time Validation tab. And let's just go ahead and add that data set that we're working with that we just added sleep periods to. Let's go ahead and add it to our grid by clicking Add Data Set. So just some couple of areas to note in Wear Time Validation. The top left section is our main algorithm. This is the Wear Time Validation algorithm that we're going to apply to our data set in an effort to remove non-wear periods. Periods I don't care about, periods when the person took the device off. You'll notice I've got some grayed out choices and a couple of algorithms to choose from. What we've done is we've made it simple for the user by adding default settings in for these algorithms so that you really don't have to think about that. You basically just choose your algorithm and click Go, and it's going to use the defaults directly from, in this example, the Choi paper to do wear time validation on your file. So down at the bottom we've got some optional screening parameters. So in our case, this example, I'm going to go ahead and choose to mark my sleep periods as non-wear. I'm also going to set a minimum wear time per day of 600 minutes. And what this setting is going to do is it's basically going to require my file to have at least 600 minutes of wear time for each day. If I don't meet that criteria, then the entire 24-hour day will be flagged as non-wear. And that's beneficial if you're trying to get rid of some non-wear days like we are. I want to take just a second and bring your attention to this validated data column. This column indicates that the data has been validated, and that's the process that we're doing now. So for this file, you can see that it says, yes, it's been validated before, but it doesn't give you any information about when. If I click Calculate right now, you'll see that it gets updated, and it says Automatic, and it gives today's date. That's a new feature. It was released in, I believe, version 6.6, but it gives you a little bit of history about when you did validation, and I'll talk about the automatic in just a second. So you'll notice we have 9 wear periods and 10 non-wear periods, and just to show you what would happen if I didn't do anything with the sleep periods, let me click Ignore and rerun. You'll see that we have 1 wear period and 2 non-wear periods, and so obviously it's marking those sleep periods as non-wear, and it's also flagging 2 non-wear periods. That would be the beginning and the end of the file. We'll take a look at that in more detail. Let's go ahead and flag our sleep periods as non-wear. So there's a details option that allows me to not only see the high-level information. You'll note at the high level I've got 32,000 minutes in this data set, but only 7,600 minutes were actually valid wear length minutes. So that brings us to about a 23% wear time. So a lot of non-wear junk, we call it, in this file. I'm going to click on the details and get a little more granular. And so you'll notice in the details section, if you've never seen this before, the top portion is the daily breakdown. So how many wear/non-wear minutes did I have for each day? Of course, the first 6 days it's flagged as all non-wear because, well, there wasn't any wear time based on our 600-minute criteria. And then the real section I'm interested in is this wear non-wear time period. So here's a breakdown of each day, of each wear and non-wear period. So you'll notice, let me just open the sleep tab up. By the way, you can have these both open at the same time. Let me go ahead and open this up. So you'll notice that we've got a large non-wear period from midnight on 10/8 through 10:20 a.m. on the 13th. And that corresponds, as you can see, to the top of the file where there's a lot of empty data. So it's basically said this is all a non-wear period. Then the next period we have is a wear period from 10:21 to 9:36. That's this area here. And then we've got a non-wear period starting at 9:37 p.m. That corresponds to our first sleep period. That non-wear period ends at 4:51 a.m., which is the end of our sleep period. And so you can see that it's actually gone through and flagged all of those sleep periods as non-wear, just as we wanted to do. And so I'm happy with these results. I realize that it's done what I want. One other side item to note, if I scroll to the very bottom of this of the graph and also scroll to the wear time validation bottom section, you'll notice I've got a huge non-wear section from 10:20 to 10:31, October 20th through October 31st, 14,620 minutes. That's going to correspond to this large non-wear period at the end of the file. So it's essentially marked all of these time periods as non-wear as well. So just go back to wear time validation and complete that discussion. I do have the option here, and it's worth mentioning, to override what the algorithm did. If I decide that I didn't want this wear period to be there, in fact I wanted this period to be a non-wear period, I can use this use checkbox here to actually just remove that wear period. And when I do that and click Save and Close over here on the right, it's essentially going to merge these 3 time slots into a single non-wear. And I can also do the same thing for wear. Suppose I wanted to mark this entire beginning of the data set as a wear period. I could just check the Use box click Save and Close, and now these two periods would be flagged as wear time. So just for an example, I'm going to mark this as a non-wear period. I want to merge these three together. You'll notice that my wear periods say 9 and non-wear is 10. So if I click Save and Close here, you'll see that number change. So I'm going to go ahead and also you'll notice that the validated data column says manual. And so what I've done is essentially I've made a manual override of the algorithm, and so it's indicating so. But for our demo, I want to keep the automatic results, so I'm just going to recalculate, and I've got my results that I had back. If I click the score button in the bottom right corner over here, it's going to move this file now into the data scoring tab for further analysis. And it's also going to load that tab for me. So you'll notice that validated data now says automatic with today's date, so I know I'm working with the right file. These results have not been updated because I have not recalculated. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's check the exclude non-wear times from analysis option. And what's going to happen is when I do that, it's going to now filter out those non-wear periods that I've just got through analyzing in the wear time validation tab. You'll notice now that my average kcal is up exceedingly. It says about 2,200 average per day. My sedentary time is now at about 23%. That sounds more in line with what I would expect. If I scroll to the right, I can take a look at my calendar days. So now I've got 8 valid calendar days, 24 if you don't count the filtering. So I've filtered out 16 calendar days by doing this wear time validation process. And so you get the idea. If you want to go back and see the old results, you don't have to undo what we did. You can simply uncheck the exclude non-wear times checkbox, click calculate, and you'll see these numbers go back to where they were. So let me just go back to where we were there. Okay, so we're pretty happy with the file now, and I'm getting some more reasonable numbers. If I click the details button, I can actually drill down and see not just my high-level overall file results, but I can see a day-by-day result. So for each day, I can now drill down and look at my hour-by-hour results for all of my metrics, for all of my cut points, for all of my kcals, my MVPA. I can drill all the way down to the epic level, and I can, in fact, export the epics that I have here. Another quick shortcut, if you wish to show the non-wear days and hours, you can just check this box and they'll appear here temporarily. But they obviously don't have any data, but you can certainly show those dates and times if you wish, just for your own convenience when exporting or when viewing. All right, so I'm pretty happy with these results. My MVPA, sorry, we got a note here from GoToMeeting. My MVPA is now at a nice 20%, so that's more of a reasonable number here. Let's go ahead and assume that we've looked at my daily activities. Let's go ahead and try to look at just the weekends. I'm just interested in how active this person was on the weekend. I can do that by adding a global date time filter. So down here in the bottom left corner, I can click Add Date Time Filter, and I can actually create several different filters for this data. Now these are what we call inclusive filters, meaning I'm not excluding times, I'm not excluding weekends, I'm actually including weekends and weekends only whenever I create this filter, for instance. So let me create a weekend filter. I'm going to choose weekends, so I just want my analysis to look at weekends, and I want to look from midnight to midnight. I click Accept. So now I've got two filters. I've got my exclude non-wear time filter, I've got a weekend filter, and ActiLife is going to look at the overlap of these two and give me the results. So if I click Calculate, okay, now my average kcals per hour goes way down. My sedentary time, it seems like it's up. My MVPA seems like it's down a little bit. And so now I've got a hunch that this person might be a little less active on the weekend, and that might be meaningful for me at some level. And I can, of course, get into the details of that and look at the weekend days. So there's only 3 days you can see that I've got analysis on. That's because there are only 3 valid weekend days in this file. And you'll also notice if I scroll to the right again, my custom column, my calendar days, says 3 now. So I've essentially filtered out another 5 days by applying the weekend filter. We can also get fancy and add a weekday filter. So if I just want to look at weekdays now, I can choose to turn one of these on, one of them off, and run my analysis. So let's just look at weekdays. Yeah, this person has much less sedentary time during the weekdays. MVPA is up slightly during the weekday. So this person's obviously more active during the week, and so again, that might be more meaningful for me for this particular analysis. So let's go ahead and just remove these global filters. I can either uncheck them like I've done here, or I can click the X next to the row and just delete that filter altogether. Another quick tip: if you right-click in the global date time filters area, you can actually export all of these. You can export the ones you have selected or all of them, and you can import them into another running version of ActiLife. And so just a kind of a hidden option that's available there. But I'll just delete them for now. I do want to explain another kind of neat feature in ActiLife that lets you be flexible with your analysis, and that is this idea of custom cut points and MVPA. So right now for this analysis, I'm using Friedson Adult 1998 cut points, and if I click the Edit button next to the cut point drop down, I'll get a list of those cut points, and I'm able to see them. I'm actually able to change and see different cut point levels or different cut point values. But suppose, for instance, that I like the Friedson cut points, but I want to change my moderate level from 5724 as the paper defined it to say 7,000. I want to be a little more stringent. I can click the Copy into New button. It's going to create a copy of the Friedson cut points, and I can name it My Cut Points. And I can actually just change this value to 6,000 or 7,000, I believe I said. And I can click Save and Use. And so now I've got my cut points, my custom cut points. I can run the calculation again, and the data that I'm looking at is now using my values as the cut points. I didn't rename any of them, so the naming didn't change here. But if I did rename them, the names would change in the columns to reflect whatever I called the cut point level. But you'll notice that my MVPA time is 20.6. That's a little different than it was with the Friedson cut point. So I can modify. We've got this MVPA. This is moderate to vigorous physical activity. If I want to look specifically at that, I can just change my moderate level and see how that is affected. Alternatively, I can choose a different MVPA level. I can choose lifestyle or vigorous if I want to raise or lower that threshold based on some specific area. And so so that's available if you want to do that. Just note that it's there. I'll change the lifestyle level to be a little bit lower. Just say it's 1500, and save and use. Rerun this calculation, and you'll see the MVPA change once again here. So it went up to 36%. So you can see it changing and the effect that changing your cut points has on that. Okay, so that sort of covers that example with that file excluding data, using my own custom cut points and MVPA, excluding sleep. Let's talk about a sort of an edge case or a unique case. Let's suppose perhaps I want to do an analysis on this demo file, but I only want to look at the sleep periods. So I've already flagged my sleep periods using the sleep analysis tool. If we go back to the Wear Time Validation tab, there's a small trick that you can do to exclude all data except your sleep times. And so just to show you quickly how to do that, I want to change my sleep period options from mark as non-wear to mark as wear. So I'm interested in just looking at the sleep periods. I want to mark them as wear time. Uncheck the minimum wear time per day. I'm going to change this to the Troiano algorithm, change it to a custom setting, and I'm actually going to set my activity threshold for non-wear to a really unreasonable number. So essentially, the activity floor for non-wear is 30,000, which will never happen. And so basically, ActiLife in this wear time validation run is going to flag every epoch as non-wear except my sleep times. And so you can see, in fact, I've got 8 wear periods, and you'll notice that those wear periods do correspond to those sleep times that we had over in the sleep tool. And so if I push this file now back over to data scoring, and rerun my calculation, now you'll see that the sedentary time goes way up, which is expected because now I'm just looking at sleep periods. My average kcals per day is really, really low. And so you may want to do some custom calculations with this data. That's just a little trick we thought we would show today, and just give you an idea of how to use ActiLife to sort of graphically flag some times that you would like to analyze and score it using wear time validation in the process. Now, I know somebody's going to say, well, that's really a strange workflow to get that to work. It is, and we're aware of that. We try to move fast, and so ActiLife has a lot of features. It does a lot of things. The workflow is not optimal because it's evolved so quickly. We are working on an ActiLife 7.0 that sort of restructures this workflow. Part of the reason we're doing this webinar today is to get some feedback so we can show you how we do things here and things that we see as important changes that need to be made, but also garner input from you, the customer, and as to what kind of changes would you like to see to improve that workflow. So feel free to give us good feedback. So at this point, I'm going to stop briefly just to answer some questions verbally. It's about 3:02. I've got about 30 minutes left to cover the next half of the presentation. And so, Brian, do we have any questions you want to try to answer verbally?
Yes, we do. We have a lot of good questions. Thank you. Jeremy, I guess I'll go through them kind of quick so that we can maybe cover a few of these verbally. One of them was about how did you open the two windows at once and do the side-by-side? So if you can show how you got that.
Yeah, so I was in wear time validation, looking at the details of wear time validation, so I had clicked that details button. ActiLife remains active, the main window, so I can actually just move those side-by-side if I want. And so for this demo, I just actually stuck sleep right beside the wear time results just to give you an illustration of what we were doing there.
Okay, good. We've had a lot of questions also about whether the webinar would be available, being recorded, and I've been answering those, but I want to just answer to anybody else that yes, it is being recorded. It will be available out on our corporate website soon. Jump to another question. We have a question about can we save the filters for future use, and I believe the context here was on the daytime filter area.
These?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, you can. So if I have a weekday filter and then a weekend filter in this example, I can have as many as I want. If I right-click anywhere below that area, I can choose to export all, and it's going to actually export this unique file type. .alds filter is the file extension, and so that file can then be re-imported later and saved off as an archive or shared with somebody if you'd like.
Okay. On the sleep scoring, how does the auto score work? Is it a validated algorithm? What is validated here versus what is our algorithm?
Okay. We had that question in our earlier session as well. The auto score button is actually using behind the scenes some same algorithms as you see in the wear time validation, specifically Rick Troiano's algorithm. It is not validated to detect sleep times, on and off sleep times. We're just using it for that as a convenience factor, and it's turned out to be a great feature, but it hasn't been validated by any third-party entity. What we're doing next to improve on this auto score feature is we're actually going to use some of these, one of these sleep scoring algorithms. So the process that we'll use in the updated version of 7.0 will be that we'll score all of our epochs using one of these algorithms, the SATA or the Cole-Kripke, and then we'll go back and look at when do we have a lot of sleep epochs versus when do we have a lot of wake epochs to do that estimation. And I guess sort of by proxy at that point we will be using a validated algorithm. But right now this is just our internal algorithm. It tends to be helpful for people who have large data sets, but yeah, it's there. It's a great tool.
Okay.
Yep, let's do one more and then we'll move on.
Okay. Can you just look at the cut points? There was a question about sedentary, a little bit of questions about the MVPA. Just explain particularly there was a question about lifestyle as well and what that means, and
Okay.
give a little bit of an overview there.
Yes, sure. So the cut points are basically categorization of counts per minute for 60-second epics. You'll see that down here below the graph. So each cut point is essentially a bin, and it's a bin used to collect the number of epics with counts per minute within that range. In other words, the sedentary bucket, if you will, gets one entry or one minute for every epic that has a value between 0 and 99. For every epic that has a value between 100 and 759, we add one to the light bucket in the results, so on and so forth. And so the design of these cut points was derived from the papers that we reference here in ActiLife. And so, for example, Patty Friedson's group in 1998 developed some adult cut points, and they were here. Now she came back and added lifestyle verbally, and that's documented in our resources online. Lifestyle was an intermediate cut point between light and moderate that she wanted to add there, so we added that. And so that's sort of where they come from. The concept of MVPA is a popular term in actigraphy. It stands for moderate to vigorous physical activity. So it's essentially a separate cut point in itself that looks at how many epics fell above the moderate level, and it's sometimes useful for categorizing activities.
Yeah, it was several questions about what is lifestyle. That seems to be catching people's attention.
Okay. You check that out on our website. If you click the question mark right here, it'll take you to a website. Lifestyle is not in that original paper, and so if maybe you're talking specifically about that, Patty Friedson literally called us and said, I would like to add the lifestyle cut point based on some other research I've done. We documented that, and it's written out there on our website. And so check that out. I'd be glad to talk more about that at a different time. So anything else quick? Or?
There's several other questions, and we'll do our best to follow up with some of these via email afterwards. We're just going to need to move on for the sake of time. Thank you.
Let's jump into case study 2 briefly. Maybe you've got a particular data set that has that you've been keeping a log diary as far as wear time goes. So in this example, we'll deal with a subject or clinician who has kept a log diary of on and off times for a file, and they're not necessarily relying on the wear time validation algorithm to flag the non-wear times because the subject or the clinical person has done that. So the goal for this case study is to show you that you can analyze just those specific time periods, and they can be different for each file. So it's very similar to the global date time filter, except now we're able to give specific time periods for each file instead of for all the files in my grid at once. And so let's remove the demo file we had earlier, and I have a log diaries group here. So I've got three files that we'll look at, and again, I'm just going to select them all, drag them over. And so what we're looking at now are these 3 files, and again, I can click on them in the viewer and see what these files look like. I don't have to double-click from Windows Explorer. I can do that right here inside ActiLife. But I've got 3 files, and so let's suppose I've kept a log of when these particular person or persons wore their device. I've got a sample log diary here. Let's just open it up and take a look. So in this case, George Foreman and Jason Jones both flagged that they wore their device each day from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Now that's not a very interesting log file, but it still gives you the point. If you're looking at a group of students or a group of children who were playing on the playground at the same time every day, and you're just interested in that time period, it's the same thing. I could have playtime 8:30 to 8:45 or whatever it is. So for these 2 individuals, I just did a quick example of them at work. I'm just looking at their work time. For Jane Doe down here, I actually created a couple of examples of how to enter your time so that you can see that in the log diary, it can be as simple as 8 a.m. I could have 8:15 a.m. I could also have military time using 1600 for 4 p.m. and so forth. One thing to note here, the subject name for each row must correspond to the subject name for the data set, not the data set file name. That's a common mistake, so we want to make sure we note that. So I formatted and created my log diary here, and in order to get that data into ActiLife, I've got to click on the Import button next to my Subject Log Diaries option, and I've got to select that log diary file and click Open. And when I do that, you'll notice that it instantly populates this grid with the log diary, giving me an import status on the far right. Was it valid? Was it invalid? Did I have any problems tying that particular log to that file? For example, is the date range out of range for that file? Is there some mistake that I made in entering the time, etc.? On the left, I have a nice summary of the results. I have 3 subject names. I got 14 log entries and 14 valid, no invalid. Quick note on the log diary format. I realize that everybody has their own format that they like to use. We can't possibly support them all, and so we have our own template. If you want to get that template, you can simply click this log diary template link here. It's going to open it up in Excel as a temporary file. You can save that off and enter in your times just like that. So I know that will be a question, so there it is. When I click Save to Files, basically it's now going to correlate those log entries to the corresponding file. And you'll notice that the log diary column now gives me a blue hyperlink. So I can click on that link and I can actually confirm that the log times for that file are correct. So I can do that quickly and go through and make sure they're right. The only way to remove the log diary entry is to click this Delete All Entries button on this particular view. So if I want to get rid of that log diary, I want to take it out of that AGD file, that's where it's being stored, is inside the data set. I have to click on the blue link, click Delete All Entries, and confirm, click OK, and that removes that file from that AGD file. And the only way to get it back is to click Import and go find your main log diary, pull it back in, and it will recorrelate at that time. So let's go ahead and do a calculation. We need to make sure we check the Use Subject Log Diaries option. If we don't check it, it's not going to apply that. But when I do check it, the output that we get will correspond just to those time periods that are in the log diary. So in this example for our first subject, we've got a total of 1671 kcals. We've got a breakdown of cut points that look something like 63, 19, 8, 99. If I click on the details for that subject, you can see that the time periods for each day correspond just to the log diary entry. So if I go to 9/8, I'm talking about 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and nothing else. Everything else has been excluded from my analysis. Same thing for the next day and so forth. And so one way to do that, if all of these were a 9 to 5, would be to add a global filter. But since our third file here has a very different results, basically what we've done is I've excluded everything in this particular file because there was no data there. But essentially, I'm getting different results for this file specifically because I called out a separate log diary. So it's interesting also to note at this point that these filters overlap. And so basically, if I have a time period that is called out in the log diary but contains some non-wear times, and I have this exclude non-wear times option checked, those non-wear times will still be excluded. Just because they're in the log diary doesn't automatically exclude them from the analysis. They're excluded if that option is checked. And so if I always want to look at every minute of my log diary, I have to uncheck that exclude non-wear times if I've done data filtering. So that sort of concludes the data analysis section. I want to move quickly now into a couple of other features that we hope to cover today. So let's talk about obtaining R-to-R heart rate data. What am I talking about when I say R-to-R? I'm talking about the R-to-R interval on a heart rate EKG wave that I'm showing on my screen here. Our new hardware, the ActiGraph WGT3X Plus, connects with an ANT-enabled heart strap. Both of these are available on our website. to give you this resolution of information with your heart rate data. What's required? Well, you need the proper device with ANT enabled. You need an ANT heart strap, and you need to properly initialize it in ActiLife. And so I'm going to walk you through that process right now. I jump over to Devices tab. I have one of those devices connected. I click Initialize. I need to make sure during initialization that I've enabled the wireless option for this particular device, and I've enabled the heart rate option. It's very important. If you don't do that, then the wireless is off by default, and it will not pair with a heart rate monitor. When you do enable this, basically it pairs with the next heart rate or heart strap that it comes into contact with. And so that's an important step. You need to make sure that's done in order to collect that data. And then, of course, make sure your patient is wearing the heart strap when you wish to collect that data. While I've got this initialization panel open, it's worth noting that you do have the option to set your device time using either your local computer's time or using the atomic server time. The atomic server time gives you the option to synchronize exactly to the minute multiple devices across multiple sites if that is of interest to you, and some of our pharmaceutical customers have requested that option, and so it's available there. So once I've deployed my device and I've downloaded the data and created my AGD, I'm not going to go through that. I will talk about how to get the R2R data out of the AGD. From the File Import Export menu, go all the way to the bottom. There's an option that says Heart Rate R2R. Go ahead and select the AGD file that contains the R2R data and click Open, and it will automatically export that into an Excel spreadsheet. And so that's what I'm looking at here. I'm going to open up another spreadsheet that I've done a little bit of formatting on. Let's see here. So here's the same data, just formatted slightly different. So what do I get from this? I get timestamps with millisecond resolution for each beat detected. I get the time since the last beat in this column, so 894 milliseconds since this previous beat, 952 since this one, etc. I also get a beat count, which is essentially a sequential counter that overlaps 0 to 255. So this helps me find problems or errors in my data. So if, for instance, the heart strap was removed, or if it went out of range for some reason, you will see a gap in your beat count, just as you do here. So this jumped from 43 to 124, and then it kept counting, and as we go down 255, you'll see it resets at 0. So when I'm doing my analysis, this lets me quickly find those type of areas that I may want to exclude from doing my my R2R analysis. So at this time, this is basically what you get with the R2R export. Now we realize that there's a need for some analytical tools for the R2R data, but we weren't quite sure what to do, and so we wanted to start initially by giving our customers the ability to get that data, allow them to do some processing in Excel or whatever tool they choose, and then move on from there. Next, I want to talk about raw data processing. So as you may know, ActiLife devices do collect a high resolution raw data during data capture, up to 100 Hertz. We do have the option in the Import-Export menu to visualize that data quickly. So let me just grab a GT3X file, full day. And so I've got this option, Raw Data Visualization. I can actually click Open File and browse to my file, and it's going to give me a real quick graph of the data in that file. I've got the option to graph it fast or slow. Slow gives me a little more detail, and you'll see that happening here on the chart. Now, why is this interesting? Well, if I'm doing some specific analysis and I'm trying to look at a particular time period when my subject was running, say, or when they were doing a 6-minute walk test, I can highlight that specific area and I can zoom in on the graph, and I can just extract that one portion of the raw data. It makes it a lot more manageable. A full day's worth of raw data is well over, when it's full, is well over 1 million rows in Excel, and it's just outside of the reasonable size for processing. And so this actually gives you the option to export this time period to CSV. Another tool that you have at your disposal, beginning with 6.7, is this feature extraction tool. And so this feature extraction tool essentially allows you to extract time and frequency domain feature sets from your raw data sets. And so this can be useful when you're working with a team who might be creating some learning algorithms for raw data, who might be trying to categorize lifestyle or different types of activities using some learning algorithms. And so you might be interested in different features in the time and frequency domain. And so to get those features may not be easy. For instance, if I'm looking at the x-axis and I want to see what's the minimum value every 10 seconds in my file, that's kind of hard to get in your own custom tool. Even harder is give me the x-axis dominant frequency every 10 seconds. This requires an FFT process that you have to put together in R or SAS and may take some time to code. This tool allows you to do that quickly within the context of ActiLife and be able to pull those features out for analysis in SAS or analysis in Excel, whatever tool you might choose to use as you work on your neural network or your learning algorithm to process this data and begin to create your own custom algorithms. And so just to quickly show what the output looks like, if I click on results, for this example, you'll see that beginning at 3:30, every 10 seconds I've got a bucket, and that bucket contains information. I've chosen to look at the minimum value for the x-axis over that 10-second period in the raw data. I've also chosen to look at the dominant frequency over that 10-second period, and so you'll see that vary over time. And as the subject gets more active or less active, you'll see some changes. For instance, at this 4:07 and 10-second mark, the minimum X value was negative 0.255 Gs. The dominant frequency was 0.859 Hertz. And so graphing that information and processing that information can reveal characteristics about a data set that may be of use for you. So we've covered a little bit about the raw data. I didn't want to get too much into that today because that's a whole webinar in itself. I do want to talk about a couple other small features that you may not be aware of. So let's jump back to the PowerPoint just briefly here. So we talked about the raw data analysis, viewing and extracting that data. Let's talk about resetting a device for long-term storage. Devices should be stored in a cool, dry location with a battery between 40 and 60% if possible. And they should be stored in a storage mode, drawing little or no current if you wish to put these devices in inventory again for later use. So let's talk quickly about how to do that. If I've got a device connected and any device that we sell qualifies, under the advanced menu I've got this factory reset option. If I click that, it's actually going to tell me that it's going to erase the data and put the device in a low power storage mode. And so if I click that, you'll see it go through that process, and you'll notice that the status will change once it's complete to indicate that it is in factory reset mode. And then the mode on the right is going to tell you, okay, it's in a reset storage mode. And so now this device can be disconnected and stored on the shelf. May get a question about the battery. The 60% is the ideal way of storing the device. In this case, I've got a fully charged device. There's not much I can do about that. We could do some complex things like put the device into a high current state until it gets to 60%, but it really doesn't affect things that much, so we just leave it where it's at for now. If the device is below 40% when you connect it and attempt to do the factory reset, ActiLife will not allow you to do that until the device reaches at least 40% battery charge. Last thing I want to talk about today is the Data Vault. This tool is available in ActiLife if you're a paying maintenance user, and so I want to encourage you to use it. It's there. It acts just like Windows Explorer. I can add files in my Data Vault. I can right-click and download files. I can delete them from my vault. The nice thing about the Data Vault is anybody using ActiLife in your organization has access to your files, and those files can be uploaded or downloaded at any time from any computer running ActiLife. A little hidden feature here, just kind of a tip. If you select 2 files or more than 2 files using Control or Shift keys, you can right-click to download both of those files at once. and ActiLife will grab them both. Otherwise, you can just click the download link on the right to get each individual file. But everybody with a maintenance agreement gets 20 gigs free. And so that was what my last slide was about here before getting into our new products. We do have a new device coming out next month. This is our WGT3X BT. BT stands for Bluetooth. And you'll note in the specifications here that this is Bluetooth LE supported. And we love this protocol, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. We are upping the memory. So we're going from 512 megabytes to 2 gigabytes, giving us 4 times the storage. A little bit better battery life, improved dynamic range. These devices will support plus or minus 8 Gs instead of just 6 Gs. And so one nice thing about the Bluetooth is that it allows us to interact with other modules like an iPhone. So we've got a new version of ActiLife Mobile coming out for iPhone 4S and up. Soon afterwards, we'll support Android devices with the same application. You'll see some improvements in ActiLife when this new device launches next month, including better wear time validation. We realize the need for more granularity in your wear time validation. We also, I didn't mention, this new device contains a capacitive sensor on the back, which allows the device to detect wear time based on contact with the skin. And so this new wear time validation will allow you to use that wear sensor to actually detect when the device was physically worn. You can also choose to use the algorithm that we've used today or use a combination of both. So you'll see that new feature come out in ActiLife. We're excited about the wear sensing on the device as an augmentation to the current wear time tools we have. We'll also be able to do proximity sensing with these devices. So if I have one device being worn by, say, a child and another device being worn by that child's mother, I'll be able to tag when they are within proximity of one another, thereby giving me the opportunity to correlate my data for analysis to see if they're more active or less active when they're around their sibling or around their parent. Another application, you might want to put a device near a coffee table or a TV to see how much time your subject spends in the vicinity of that device. So that will be available in ActiLife 6.9, which is scheduled for next month. In addition, we'll be adding group initialization to ActiLife, which will allow you to initialize multiple devices in a group setting. So you can basically initialize devices to be worn in multiple locations on the body, and they'll sort of act like one device. And that might help you in your post-processing when you're trying to align your data or look at your data in a certain way. So that covers our new products. That covers the advanced features that we wanted to cover today in our webinar. Please be sure to take the survey after the webinar is over. There's a quick survey that will pop up. It's really fast. It'll help us with our planning. We do have a support website. A lot of folks don't know about this, but if you go to this site, there's an entire user forum that has a lot of rich information about our hardware and about our software right on that help site. So you can dig in, you can see information about collecting R-to-R heart rate data, the things that I've gone over today. How does that work? How do you download that data? It's all covered very well in that forum, so spend some time there. So we're basically at our 1 hour limit. I want to pause here again before we close out and take any questions that we might have. So Brian, if you have any that we can address, we can try to do that now.
Sure. We just came in about proximity sensing. Is that going to require a new hardware device to do that?
Yes, proximity sensing will require the new WGT3X BT. I know this looks like the same device. It is the same housing, but it is a different device, different serial number. The serial number will start with MOS, and so that device will be required to do the proximity sensing.
And you said when that was going to be available?
Yeah, that'll be the 1st of November.
Okay. There are a lot of good questions that I just haven't covered. There was one in the area of feature extraction. In raw data format, which frequency is recommended to be used between 30 and 100 hertz. Now, Jeremy, I know typically we don't consider ourselves really the researchers here, so I don't really think we can give a recommendation of which frequency to use for a use case.
Yeah, that's exactly right. We offer between 30 and 100 hertz. If you want my humble opinion, and the opinion of most folks here, we believe that human activity is limited to around 20 hertz. And so 40 hertz typically is more than enough to capture human activity. Again, that's my opinion. I'm not publishing anything on that, but we just feel strongly about that here at ActiGraph. But the device does go up to 100 hertz in 10 hertz increments, and so it's at your discretion. Okay, guys, thank you guys and gals for joining us today. We appreciate it. I know we went a few minutes over our hour limit there. This webinar will be archived on our website, and you can check that out maybe later today if we have time to get it up. Again, please take the survey when you close out. Go to webinar, it will pop up with a survey. It's very short. We'd love to hear what topics you'd like to see in the future, and we'd love to get some feedback from you. So thank you again for your time today. We hope it was beneficial, and we look forward to working with each of you in the future. Take care. Hold on.